Great day, Matt. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on again today. My name is Peter from Prime Wellness, and I'm so excited to have Matt on again. I interviewed him a few weeks ago, and I know that many of you received a lot of value from it. We spoke about the psyche, and today we're speaking about everything nutrition. So thanks for being on, Matt.
Pleasure to be here, Pete. Happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Matt's got an extensive background in personal training, strength and conditioning, nutrition, life coaching, and it all accumulates into medical massage, which is what he identifies with. But he has such a big knowledge base in nutrition, which is why I really wanted to bring him on to interview him so that we can give you guys at home some information, some value, and maybe some tips that you can take with you so you can start actioning things now, because information is good, but it's obviously we want to give you things that you can start rolling with at home to start to experience the benefits. So what I wanted to ask Matt is, Matt, can you share a little bit of your background as to how you accumulated all of your knowledge on nutrition? You spoke about it in our first interview, but I'd love to kind of hear how you accumulated all of this knowledge.
So it started, I guess, subconsciously in a way back in whatever year that was, when I actually left school in year 10 or 11 to be a greenkeeper. And a part of the greenkeeping qualification is studying the soil and getting into the science of the soil and how to grow essentially sports turf. And you learn about acidity, the microorganisms, the effect that fertilizers have, the effect that pesticides have, etc., etc. So that allowed me to really help out my dad's lawn at home, which was great. And from that, I was a greenkeeper for the better part of a decade. So when I got, I guess in a way, my soul drove me out of that. I was getting quite bored. I wasn't getting stimulated. So that was a sign from the gods for me to move on. So I studied nutrition in London. I was floating between London and France. The nutrition course I did with the British School of Yoga actually went deeper into the soil science. And every other nutrition qualification that I looked at the time was all about supplements, was all about powders, was all about seemingly everything else except food. So doing that qualification, which was actually an advanced diploma of nutrition in Europe, allowed me to get an insight of how to fill the gaps nutritionally. And you learn very quickly that it doesn't matter what food you eat, if it comes from a rubbish foundation, i.e. poor quality soil, the plant or animal can't be healthier than the plant it's eating or the soil that it's in. So a lot of people, for example, think that if they take their multivitamin each day, they're benefiting their health. Now, in some instances, yes, you may be, but what a lot of people don't realize is that with vitamins, they just help metabolize the food that you eat. So if you're taking your vitamins, but you're eating rubbish, you just help metabolizing rubbish. But if you eat good, high quality food that's preferably from an organic soil, then you're eating food with vitamins in it. So then the vitamins are redundant. So a lot of people aren't really aware of that. They take the vitamins because they see the pretty ads on TV and the beautiful blonde with flowing hair having this vitamin, so they think they need it as well. But again, going back to what we talked about last time, is a lot of these vitamins are funded by the medical industry and the pharmaceutical companies. So again, that's a business. That really prompted me into getting more depth in nutrition and actually where the whole industry of nutrition comes from. And it comes from the 18th century. It dates way, 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 way back. And I'll touch on it a little bit later with the organic farming thing. But when I was studying, I was thinking to myself, why doesn't anybody know this? Why don't they teach this? And when I came back to Australia from Europe, I applied for a few nutrition jobs, and they turned me down because I didn't have a degree in nutrition, essentially. So I had a few consultations with nutritionists and dietitians, and I asked them about nutrition, essentially. And essentially what I got back was a little bit underwhelming, because it was amazing to me how little they actually knew about food. And they knew nothing about the science of the soil. And so the question I put to them and to anyone out there is, can you effectively study nutrition without proper knowledge of the soil? And no one could answer that. So for me, it all starts in the ground, and that's where the attention needs to be. And I find farmers know more about nutrition than most dietitians today.
Mm. And it's so interesting, the fact that you've got the background of actually studying horticulture and being there with the soil. Like, not many, I wouldn't imagine it's common for many people out there who have studied nutrition and to be a dietitian and so forth, to have that connection of knowledge as well. It sounds like you've really got on a journey. And particularly the insights you've gathered within Europe, within that space. Obviously, it's very different to what's being taught in Australia and then in much of the Western world.
Well, a lot of the nutrition courses out there today are funded by Big Pharma, and they're obviously funded by essentially the medical industry. So I'm a bit skeptical of that. There are some good courses out there that are a bit different. But again, it comes to making money. So you're going to make more money selling drugs than you are teaching people how to eat properly. And a lot of people don't, I mean, they do realize it intuitively, but it's not what it's shown in your face all day, every day, that there's no two diets that are going to work for everyone. There's no, this diet's going to work for 1,000 people. That's not physiologically possible. You give 10 people one diet and you'll get 10 different results every time. So it's about finding what works for the person. Depending how deep you want to go, that can go all the way back to the soil as well. It all comes back to the soil.
Wow. And I remember learning in my health coaching training that it's bio-individuality. So one man's food can be another man's poison. So obviously we've got lots of dietary protocols out there that can create therapeutic benefits. For example, I don't know what you know about veganism and so forth, but I'm like, well, if it works for some people, great. If it doesn't work for other people, listen to your body. Same with paleo or whole food. If it works for you, that's great. If not, find something that agrees with you. But one common thing I've heard, one thread I've heard from you, is the soil. So how do you, in terms of things for people at home, how do you create opportunities for you to get food with nutrient-dense soil? Is it from farmers markets, or what? How do you typically source it for yourself? What do you recommend to clients?
So with the soil, I typically, if I'm in I'll 90% of my diet, 100% if I can, but the 10% when if I go out with family or friends. You need that kind of buffer. It's not always possible to eat organic, but I will eat organic as much as I can. And anyone who knows me can verify that.
Yeah.
I'll always shop at an organic shop, obviously, and I'll look at the food and I'll look where it came from, and I'll always do my own research into that farm or that wherever it's come from. Ideally, I will actually go visit the farm myself, and the guy I get meat from, who's at the Ramsgate markets every Saturday morning, I've visited his farm several times, and I've seen the way he farmed. I've seen the way he treats the animals. I've seen the way he feeds the animals. I've seen the way he interacts with the animals, and it's just how nature intended. And I know with the veganism and vegetarian movements out there, I get the animal cruelty thing. I mean, that's a discussion in itself.
Topic, yeah.
Yeah. So the best advice I give anyone with that regard is do your own research and know that if you're going to buy organic, the farmers have to jump through hoops to get that organic label. And I think it's up to $10,000 to $30,000 a year just to keep the certification in some instances. So the farmers certainly do have to do their bit. And remember, all organic means is just there's no pesticides being sprayed on the food. That's just been grown naturally. Biodynamic, which is a step above organic, is the highest quality food you can get. But unfortunately, most people today will buy, it'll say organic on the label, but often it's not certified organic. They just put it on the label. And I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was Hungry Jack's promoted or advertised they used organic beef. Mm-hmm. But what a lot of people didn't realize was that was the name of the company supplying the beef. So the beef itself wasn't organic, but the company was called Organic Beef. So that was the legal loophole that they use for that. But that does happen a lot. But to answer the question, do your own research, see where it comes from, ask the farmer 1,000 questions and test their knowledge, ask questions. And that's just called modern day hunting, really.
And in terms of the benefits, which we'll get into, but someone eating organic over non-organic, like what benefits would they typically experience? What do you see your clients that follow through experience, and you yourself, like what are the benefits?
Well, the benefits are really, if you want to get into it, quite limitless. There was a study, the longest study that I know of was done in Radali Institute in the USA, where they did a 31-year study comparing conventional foods versus organic foods and the farming methods as well. And what they found hands down was organic had more nutrients. It was better in drought. It wardened off pests and bugs a lot quicker. The plant's immune system was a lot stronger. The soil held water a lot better. They found in 1 square foot of organic soil, that 1 square foot can hold up to 27 litres of water, where on the commercially based produce area, when it rained or when they irrigated the soil, everything would just be washed away. So that food goes into you. And I know I've read some studies by the British Soil Association that I think, I'm trying to get the numbers right, there were some foods that were 40 times more nutrient dense than others.
Wow.
So a lot of people say, oh, it's more expensive, blah, blah, blah. But if you think you're eating more nutrients, so it's more nutrient dense, you're going to get fuller quicker. And if you get fuller quicker, you actually eat less. So over a time span, I challenge anyone, if you buy commercial versus organic, you'll actually eat less organic food purely because there's more nutrients in it. If you eat less food, you're going to spend less money on the food. So yes, on the shelf, organic is more expensive, but over a long period of time, it ends up being cheaper in the long run. And if the cost is a thing, then, I mean, if you were to buy a car and the car salesman said to you, you know, oh, this car is double all the other cars, but it runs 40 times better, you'd buy it in a heartbeat, wouldn't you? But we're in a culture today that we'll put the best fuel in our car, but we'll put the worst fuel in our body. But that's our culture.
Yeah, and like I remember telling people when organic was I first came into it, you know, a few years ago, when I tell some of the people within that culture, they're like, huh? Like, why are you spending that? Like, what's the benefit? Nothing's been proven. But as you said, that's a pretty significant study. What was it, 31 years?
31 years in comparison, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember learning when I was studying natural medicine, yes, it's much more nutrient dense. And so that, as you're saying, that's going to fill people up for longer. But in saying that as well, if people, you think about one thing that I tell to clients is that we tend to be living pretty high level life nowadays in terms of the output, i.e. stress and things like that. So I feel like it's almost like we're running from a saber tooth, and that's just normal for us to be operating at that level. And that's why getting that nutrient density is probably quite important, right? Like, wouldn't you agree? Is that one of the things that is
Absolutely.
necessary?
A lot of people don't realize that pretty much everything pre-1950 was organic. When at the end of World War II, they said, oh, we've got all these factories full of gunpowder, what can we do? And then some, I can't think of his name, someone came up with the concept that you can turn gunpowder into fertilizer. So they used these as fertilizer and made their crops grow massively just overnight. And that's essentially where the whole pesticide thing comes from. But what a lot of people don't realize is even the argument that it's not more nutrient dense, which science proves it is, but let's just say for conversation purposes that it's the same, then they don't realize the effect that insecticides, rodenticides, fungicides, they don't realize what that effect has on people. And working as a greenkeeper, I know this firsthand because I used to spray the stuff all the time. And I used to have to wear gas masks, full body suits, gloves, boots. And typically you spray a lot more in the summer. So you're dripping with sweat spraying this stuff on. Then you have to water it in for 20 minutes just to get the effect of it. Yet, if you saw that stuff being sprayed on your food, I'd argue with anyone if you'd actually eat it. But what a lot of people don't realize is that most pesticides they use are either neurogenic or estrogenic, which means the neurogenic chemicals will affect the nervous system. The estrogenic chemicals will boost estrogen levels in the body. What that looks like today is joint laxity, holding fluid retention. You've got typical the man boob look and a lot of cellulite and a lot of people who can't shift that weight around the spare tire around the tummy. And what estrogen does in that case is if you have too much estrogen, it can throw the estrogen testosterone balance way out. And how it works for the bugs with estrogenic compounds in the fertilizer, you spray these chemicals on the plant in order to get rid of the bugs, right? Well, each bug has around 24-hour to 2-week breeding cycle. So what it does is boost the estrogen levels in the bugs. And that essentially, they breed themselves out, so they can't reproduce. So within two weeks to a month, that bug is now gone because they can't reproduce, so they've died themselves out. Now, what's a massive problem in the world today? Infertility. So there's a massive correlation there. And everyone who comes to me for infertility issues and they want to get pregnant, I always ask, how much soy are you having? How much estrogen are you having? Their body tells you the answer, but you have to be consciously aware of what you're putting in your mouth, because a lot of the chemicals will either affect you neurally, so your nervous system. Think of all the neural diseases out there: Alzheimer's, dementia, motor neurons disease, MS, etc. And retaining fluid, thyroid issues, infertility. I mean, the list goes on. And it can all be traced back to the foods that you eat. And a lot of experts out there will tell you, oh, but it doesn't affect you because it's so diluted, it doesn't affect the body, and they work in parts per million, sometimes parts per billion. Well, let me tell you that the hormonal system works at parts per billion trillion. So it can't not have a hormonal effect on the body.
Wow, and that's really interesting to hear, because I was going to ask you, what about, it's like people don't notice it because it's at that low level. It's like chronic inflammation. It's like it's there for years and years, and then all of a sudden people go, where did this come from? But it had been accumulating, and is it kind of the same with these chemicals and so forth? They can be like, why have I got infertility all of a sudden? But it's been from a chronic basis of taking in those types of foods over a period of years. It's kind of,
Well, absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the body is a master compensator.
Mm,
It is infinitely more intelligent than you and I consciously are. It knows how to keep you functioning. But as you said, day after day, week after week, month after month, decade after decade, you keep putting these substances in your body. The first thing that's going to do is the body's going to recognize it as a foreign substance, so it's potential harmful invader. So it will put everything else on hold: digestion, repair, stress repair, tissue building, etc. All that's going to put aside to deal with the invader. As it deals with the invader, it has to then push all the toxins aside, and it will typically do that in the fat. So we store all toxins in the fat, as does cows, pigs, or pretty much all the animals that we eat from farms. All their toxins get put into the fat. Now, the best cuts of meat you can get at a restaurant are the fatty cuts of meat, right? And they advertise grain fed as, you know, a premium source of meat. But reality, cows and pigs aren't designed to eat grain. So when they eat it, it stresses them out, it inflames their tissue. The animal gets basically put onto your plate, and then you eat the inflamed tissue, and we wonder why we're inflamed all the time.
100%. And that's why I know with some of the older generations, they're like, you don't eat the fat, you chop the fat off the meat. But we know if it's from an organic source, there's actually anti-inflammatory compounds in it, such as omega-3s that are similar to what we have in fish, correct?
Absolutely. But not only that, half the human cell wall is made of saturated fat. So it actually insulates our own body. And anyone who's been through a bodybuilding, who's trained to be a bodybuilder and actually done a competition will tell you, when you get down to such low fat body percentages, your body really struggles. You might look good in the mirror, but for example, if women drop below 15% body fat, they start getting all kinds of hormonal issues. Their periods might stop. Their periods might last for too long. They'll get headaches, they'll cramp. And it takes a good 2 years for the hormonal system from that to balance itself out. And what do we have today? All these low fat diets, diet this, diet that. And we wonder why we've got hormonal problems all the time. I just think the information that's being presented out there, you know, fat's bad, all this kind of stuff, it's just absolute rubbish. But again, with the whole fat thing, saturated fat, if it's from a good source, is very, very, very good for you. But if we're talking commercially raised animal produce, I wouldn't be eating that fat, because their fat would be full of toxins. So again, it all comes back to the source where it's come from.
Definitely. And on that note, well, like I'm a big fat advocate as well. With healthy saturated fats, do you believe there's kind of a limit for people to have? Or like, because in my research, I've seen different numbers, but if you're having a good quality fat, is there really a limit to what you can have? It's like you can't eat more than you could physically have when it's good quality food, correct? Like you wouldn't have the satiety to eat more than you could actually ingest. What do you think in regards to that?
Well, it's different for everyone. Your nutrient needs are basically dependent upon, they're determined by your genetics, typically. So for example, for me, I'm from Scandinavian heritage. So during the colder months like now, my diet would be about 80% fats and oils and proteins. During the summer, that goes down to about 50 to 60%. But that's me. That's what by listening to my body and what it wants and what it needs day to day, week to week, etc. Changes all the time. So it depends on how physical you are, depends on how sedentary you are, depends how stressed you are, depends how hydrated you are. Typically, when you've had a very lean protein source or lots of vegetables and you still feel hungry, that's the body wanting fat.
Mm.
And you eat just enough to not be hungry anymore. You'll know when you've eaten too much fat because you'll feel like you want to throw up.
Okay.
It's really that simple. But again, it's massively different for everyone. The best way that I could answer that question without going on an 8-hour tangent would be to recommend the book, The Metabolic Typing Diet by William Walcott. And he has a very comprehensive questionnaire. I think there's about 76 questions in there. And it goes through how you feel about these combinations, these, and what it basically shows you at the end is if you'll be a protein type, carbohydrate type, or a mixed type. So it shows you what macronutrient proportions should be on your plate to fit right with your own metabolic type. And it's massively different for everyone. So I'm very skeptical of people who give out these diet plans. So, because it's so different person to person. I know some strength coaches even they won't sign a client up for less than 3 years because they have to see how the whole body, how they respond to all these different meals and all these supplements, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah.
It's incredible. And I was going to ask, in terms of the patterns that come up within your practice with your clients, you said infertility is one that's obviously nutrition is going to be involved in the majority of them. How about things like stress, like people who are running a lot of stress? So I feel like that's one of the common drivers of illness nowadays. Is there any sort of guidelines nutritionally? Is it kind of, once again, it's going to be bio-individual? It depends on the person in front of you.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'll do my best to give a good answer. Again, I'm trying not to go too far out there. To handle the stress, you have to think, what is stress? Stress is essentially perception. So there's 6 main types of stress. You have chemical stress, nutritional stress, physical stress, electromagnetic stress, thermal stress, and mental emotional stress. So determining which one will help dictate that. But from a nutritional standpoint, the more stressed you are, the more you need the good nutrition, because the more nutrients you have in your system, the better you'll be able to buffer the stress. So essentially, anytime we are stressed, we go into what's called a catabolic state. Catabolic means tissue break down tissue. And the tissue breaks down tissue to support the nervous system. Okay. When you're in a catabolic state, you're making the new tissue out of the raw materials you have on board. Now, the raw materials you have on board are essentially whatever you're eating. So you've got 200 million cells dying every second, 200 million, 200 million, 200 million. Could be here for a while. Now, we make those cells out of the foods that we eat. So next time you're going for a French fry, think, do I want to make a new liver out of that? Do I want to make bone out of that? And that's essentially, you literally are what you eat. So with that, I've never met anyone handle stress on a bad diet. I'll put it that way. And if you study psychoneuroimmunology, it clearly shows that what you eat dictates how you think. And there's never been a person in recorded medical history that has a mental illness that hasn't been nutrient deficient as well, and or malnourished.
Well, yeah, because we know that inflammation, they're starting to link to things like anxiety and depression and mental illness. And as you said, some of the drivers of stress, i.e. inflammation in a way, is the nutrition as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. That basically your inflammation is dictated by your nutrition. So one of the biggest So when I was a personal trainer full time, a lot of people came to me for either strength, weight loss, and toning. That was the top three, not necessarily in that order, but that was the top three most common answers. And I was looking at their diet logs. I was saying, "Are you sure you don't react to that?" No, it's fine. No, my dietitian, nutritionist, naturopath said I can eat all that. I'll say, cool. Did you get tested? No? Okay, great. So how did you feel after those? I felt a bit mentally foggy. I didn't have enough energy. I didn't this or that. So it's probably the food that you're eating. So if you're feeling anything but happy and energized after that, that your body doesn't like that food. So in the book, your food allergies are making you fat. I can't think of the author right now. It shows that if you have a food that you're intolerant to, and it can be vastly different for everyone. So example, I'm intolerant to chicken eggs, but I can have duck eggs. Now, eggs are promoted to be a superfood of nature, which they are, but my body doesn't like them. So sucks to be me. But I had to find that out the hard way. I got myself tested and it came up. So I haven't had an egg since that day. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is when they have foods that they're intolerant to, and the top culprits are usually nuts, grains, seeds, and dairy, when they have those foods repeatedly, it's promoting inflammation every single time. And as long as you have one atom of that food in your system, it's promoting inflammation the entire time. Now, if you have a food, say you have breakfast on Monday morning, that food is still going through your system and promoting whatever it's promoting up until Thursday night. So we have a retention time of about 55 to 72 hours. And if you're having the same food every single day, well, then you can see how that just becomes a chronic pick your poison. Really. And that's where a lot of people get it wrong.
Yeah, and that's really, really interesting for people to hear at home, that you can be eating foods that your body just doesn't respond to, but unless you ask the question, unless you test, unless you get some sort of validity to the information that you're running with, you could just be reacting all the time. And I know in my case, and you probably became aware with the eggs, but I realized that I was reacting to things like dairy and gluten. And I remember at first when I found out that they were doing that, it was kind of like dairy and gluten are bad, but they're not necessarily. It depends on the person, correct?
Yeah, I mean, with gluten, it's not actually gluten itself, it's the gliadin, which is the sticky protein in gluten. Most people react to. With dairy, I mean, 90% of the world's adult population can't effectively break down dairy. And there's a pretty good reason for that. And that reason is because we stop producing rennin, which is the hormone that helps curdle milk in the gut, at about age of 2 or 3, because that's traditionally when tribes used to stop breastfeeding their kids. So after you stop producing rennin, that hormone, you're not really designed to have dairy anymore after that. And the whole concept of having having dairy for calcium is absolute propaganda. That's just brilliant marketing, so credit where it's due. But there's more calcium in green leafy vegetables than there is in dairy. And even if there was more calcium in dairy, your body probably can't use it anyway, so then it's just redundant. Then they add pasteurization and homogenization to the dairy, which further breaks it down and further kills the enzyme. So your body has to use its own energy force to enliven the food in order to digest it and break it down, which makes you tired. So then you go for a coffee, have some sugar, and just this cycle goes on and on and on and on and on and on. But statistically, 10% of the world's adult population can effectively digest dairy, and they're typically from Scandinavian countries. So got one back.
Oh, woo. You can't have chicken eggs, but you can have chicken. Yeah, and I know, like, if you look at immune stimulation, whether it's allergies or asthma or any respiratory inflammation, like inflammation, lots of causes, but just I know when I have clients and they've got regular immune system problems, one of the common things to just try out. It's not like it's permanent, but imagine like you would do, you just eliminate things, you test, you want to build a clear baseline of what's working and what isn't.
Yeah, typically what I would do with a client was get them to cut out nuts, grains, seeds, dairy for 7 to 10 days, reintroduce one of those food groups at a time and just see how they react. Most people will have a reaction to dairy and or grains. They're the most two that I've seen clinically. You may respond to it, you may not. You don't know until you really try. And that's the long and cheap way to do it. The short and expensive way to do it is to get yourself blood tested. And that will come up, you'll get the results by that afternoon, typically. But the trick with nutrition is your own body. Your own body is the best test. Your own body is talking to you 24/7. And what we've lost as a culture is how to tune in and listen to what our bodies are telling us. How do our bodies tell us that we need more carbohydrate? What is it telling us when we need more fat, etc., etc.? When we're getting anxious, what is that telling us? When we're getting tired and depressed, what is that telling us? All these little signals are coming our way 24/7, but in our culture, we've shut that off, and we go for the Wheat Bix or the cornflakes in the morning, which is sugar. Then we go for our cappuccino, which is caffeine and sugar. Then we go have a jam donut for lunch, sugar, and then we come home and have this massive meal of roast chicken and whatever else. And our bodies aren't designed for that. This is plain and simple. If you think our nutrition needs are based on our genetics, it takes the human genome, according to research, approximately 100,000 years to evolve 0.01%. So, simplest way of saying we're just cavemen in cars.
And that's really interesting for people to hear that, because we're flinging lots of these new foods into our body going, oh, but it's what people do. But that's, you can't really deny that. If you're saying it takes that long to evolve, I can understand why lots of people are having problems with grains, because I know that grains weren't always commonly there. And what with grains and those affecting some people, what does it tend to be? Is it as you said, the gliadin within the wheat, or is it lectins? I believe that's another compound that can cause problems for people as well.
Yeah, what it really does is, because it's so sticky, it has the same effect in the intestinal tract. So instead of the intestinal tract being nice and smooth and wavy and fluidy, etc., what it does, it can have several different impacts, but it can actually wipe out the microvilli in the small intestine. And these microvilli are the ones that absorb all the nutrients into the bloodstream and then distribute it to the cells via the portal vein and the liver. It can wipe out those. It can also damage those. Think of a little war zone in your gut. Guns going off, grenades getting thrown, bombs, etc. For most people, and I think statistically 60% of white-skinned people are gluten intolerant, and I think 40% of dark-skinned people are gluten intolerant. I think it's give or take that. It's been a while since I've looked at that research. When you're intolerant to that, you're essentially inviting a war into your gut, essentially. So if you think a war is going to pass through your neighborhood with bombs and guns and all that kind of stuff, think of the aftermath that's going to leave. So buildings are going to be blown up, trees will be knocked down, potholes everywhere, people, injured, lying in the street. Essentially, that's what's happening in the gut. Now, I don't know too many people who can deal with that and still perform at their best. Because again, the gut is where it's at. 80% of your immune system is in your gut. There are more neurons in your gut than your spinal cord and your brain combined, which is a lot. It is a lot. And people who tell me they have a gut feeling, well, that's impeded and corrupted by the damage done on the gut by the food that you're eating. So all your senses automatically become dulled because your sensory system has now been dulled because of the damage that's been done. So, I mean, I could go on for hours just on the list of what the damage can be done caused by these foods, but I'm doing my best not to. I mean, it affects everyone differently. You can get gut issues, you can get headaches, you can get dry mouth, you can get itchy eyes, itchy skin, rash, excess saliva, excess mucus, blocked nose, itchy bum, dandruff, etc. All these are symptoms of food intolerances and that your body doesn't like what you're putting into it.
And it's the body just trying to expel it in whichever way that it can, correct? It's just, if we're chronically putting it in again and again and again, the body's trying to expel it. And that's where we get these funny symptoms that many people just go, oh, I just get eczema, it's just what I have. Or, oh, I've just, I get allergies. And there isn't the common knowledge of what can be driving those things.
Well, no, I mean, the body's not masochistic. It wants to heal. It wants to detox 24/7. And I mean, the main detox pathways of the body is skin, is breath, is defecating, is urinating, sweating. All these are your body's way of detoxing. So if you have a skin condition of eczema, unless you were born with it, that's not how you are. That's not the thing. It's at least 80 to 90% of that eczema would be diet. And no one who has anything but good health isn't just like that. Unless you were born with it, you're not just like that. Then a lot of people think, oh, well, my parents were this, so I'm this. Well, if you look at the statistics on genetic diseases, then that's only 5 to 7% of contributors to ill health anyway. So I'm not big on blaming genetics. A lot of people hang on to it because it's their excuse and license to eat crap. But that goes back to the belief systems, which we talked about the other week. So I refer back to that. But yeah.
Yeah, because we know that epigenetics are responsible for 95% of gene expression, right? And in English, what that means at home for people is if you have some sort of illness or disease, it's like, yeah, you can have the gene, which is the gun, but it's your environment that actually pulls the trigger on it. And your environment is your food, your stress, your lifestyle, your mindset, sleep, all of these things. But food is massive in that. And the reason I went deep into food myself was I had my autoimmune disease, my inflammatory arthritis, and my suggestion from the medical system was take these drugs, good luck. That's going to switch things off. That's what you do. And then I went down this route, which is why I'm very familiar with epigenetics. And you're right, Matt, whatever, like you can go, oh, it's in my family and stuff. But if you weren't born with it, there's a massive, like a 95% likelihood that you can actually do something about it.
Absolutely. And even for the people who want to get in shape and be healthy, and that might look like going to the gym, it might look like going to yoga, going for a walk along the beach, whatever it is, you might do that for an hour a day, hypothetically. So we'll say 5 to 7 hours a week of taking care of yourself. Well, you on average have 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. So that's 21 meals. 21 meals versus 5 to 7 hours is no contest. Your knife and fork are more powerful than any coach, doctor, therapist, trainer will ever be. It's I always tell people in the gym is where the battle is, but at home that's where the war is. So do you want to win the battle or win the war? And I think, I mean, for a lot of people, there's the nutrition industry itself is so overwhelming, and there's so much information out there. And the best thing you can just simply do is listen to your body. But that takes time. It takes, you have to go in. As the famous yogi saying, if you don't go within, you go without. And instead of relying on information out there, look at the information in here, because that will give you everything you need to know. And not only will that give you the information you need to know, but also empowers you to make the change yourself.
And that's great. I was going to ask you that. What sort of guidelines do you typically provide for your clients? And obviously, as you said, to build a starting point, if there's issues, it's the grains, dairies, nuts, seeds, and so forth. But in terms of people going within and becoming aware of that, are things like writing things down useful? Just to write down, I ate this food, how am I feeling 3 hours later? Because it's not like you necessarily get a response straight away. Is that correct? Or does the body typically respond straight away for them to be aware?
From my experience, the more you have a reaction to it, the quicker it's going to show up. So for example, when I had, basically used to make myself an omelette every morning, I would get a runny nose within about 5 minutes. Now, how that works scientifically is that my body doesn't respond well to the molecules inside the egg. So what my body will do is overproduce mucus, because mucus helps break the food down, but it couldn't break it down effectively. So it overproduced mucus. So I got a runny nose. Now, if I didn't listen to that as well as I did, that would have eventually blocked my sinuses, which would have enabled me to not breathe through my nose anymore. My head would have dropped forward, drop my mandible, pull it forward, open up my mouth to get more oxygen in. So then I'll become a mouth breather. Becoming a mouth breather, you get more acidity in the body. You get more of a hump at the base of the neck. You get poor posture, poor joint alignment, and the list goes on. Now, with getting back to the question without going on another tangent, I simply would tell people to write down what they've had, simply a tick or a cross. You would need to monitor that for probably about 4 hours. If you get hungry within 3 to 4 hours of eating, if you get hungry within about 2 hours after eating, you're either dehydrated or your macronutrient proportion isn't quite right. So that's just a matter of fine tuning. What I also get people to do is get them to write down everything they ate on Monday. It's okay, great. Don't eat that again until Friday. That gives the system enough time to get it through the system, gives them more variety in the diet. And the worst case I've heard of that, of doing that with a client, they had more energy. That was the worst case. Someone even lost about 2 kilos, I think, in a week, just from getting more variety in the diet. So, yeah, the most common dysfunction I would see with food is people having the same foods day in, day out, and not really having a relationship with their food. I think that's a discussion for another time, but when you have a relationship with something, it becomes you. And a lot of people don't realize that when you eat food, you're taking on the consciousness of that food. That food is now becoming a part of you. So whatever you're doing, you're sharing with the world. And without getting too deep onto that, it's really important for people to realize that food informs your body how to function. And if you're not liking the way you're functioning day to day, then look at your food.
Yeah, and that's gold. And one thing that's coming to mind, I think it was said this way, if your body doesn't change the food will change your body.
I mean, yeah, it's very easy to prove. Your body shape reflects the choices you've made. It's quite simple.
Yeah. So in terms of that variety and mixing it up, obviously it's almost a whole other topic, but What are some of the base guidelines you typically recommend to people? Obviously, as you said, like you said before we started, what was it? If it has two eyes or it's alive, what were basically the guidelines?
So the guidelines with that, I mean, we have all this processed crap out there today. If it's in a packet, don't go near it. If you can't pronounce an ingredient in ingredients, your liver won't like it. And if it doesn't grow out of the ground or have a set of eyes, it's probably not a food. And your body doesn't recognize it as a food. Maybe in a couple of 100,000 years' time, we'll evolve to eat that kind of stuff. But for now, we kind of have to stick to what nature gives us. That's what we're designed for. You wouldn't put the wrong petrol in the car, so put the right petrol in you.
100%. And with someone, obviously there's some people on the opposite sides of the spectrum. They might be eating processed foods every day. They're used to getting, as you said, that donut for lunch. Like, how do you progress them towards a health? Do you go, we're all in, like everything changes, or do you kind of do one thing at a time? For people at home who want to create some change in their diet and what they're eating, would you say it depends on the person, or one thing at a time, or let's do it all?
Look, in a perfect world, I would have said we're doing it all. We're 100% head first. We're going deep. Experience has taught me that you have to find what works for the person. It's that simple. It's, I usually tell people, whatever you eat a lot of, be it cereal, milk, donuts, whatever, have a good version of it. So if you're going to have cereal, have organic cereal. Even people enjoying their vices too much, the typical vices being chocolate, ice cream, alcohol, smoking, coffee. There's a healthier way to have it. And if you're going to have it, then you can get organic wine. You can get raw ice cream. You can smoke organic or vaporize organic tobacco. Minimize your exposure to these toxins so your body has a chance to deal with it. If cost is an issue, I would typically tell people, if you have a choice between buying organic meat and organic veg, go organic meat. Because if you get a kilo of steak as an example, well, think about what cows do all day. They eat grass, more or less non-stop. So they're just compounding vegetable matter into their tissue for you. So 1 pound of vegetable meat is equivalent to 6 pounds of vegetable matter.
Wow.
So if you have the choice of organic meat, organic veg, go organic meat every single time. And because there's more nutrients that are biochemically available to the body in meat than there are in vegetables. And that's a topic for another day as well. At least with the vegetables, you can somewhat wash the pesticide residue off a little bit. Harder to do that with meat, and it's probably a bit weird. But yeah, I mean, it's all about choices, right? So if you can't go 100% organic, first stick with what you can do. Whatever you eat a lot of, find the healthiest version of that food that you can. Then it becomes a decision between meat and veg. Buy organic meat every time. And then over time, hopefully you can incorporate it all.
And what do you think about the clean 15 and the dirty dozen? That can be a good way for people to financially work their way in. I know for you watching at home, if you just Google clean 15, dirty dozen, this is how you can start. What do you think of that, Matt? Do you think that's very valid, or is it still like, what do you think?
I think you can call it what you want. It comes down to the same thing, no matter how you slice it. You have to find what works for you. It's that simple. You know, the paleo diet, Ornish diet, the Pritikin diet. There's so many out there. I Googled on, what day is it today? Wednesday. I Googled on Sunday. I just typed in diet books, and it came up with 2.8 billion.
2.8 billion.
Billion. So that tells me as a culture that we're confused. No one's figured it out yet. And what people don't realize that in the food manufacturing industry, there's 1,500 scientists. 75 are independently funded. So that means 1,425 scientists that do the research that you read, and what you decide to buy and put in your mouth are bought and paid for. And scientists are the modern day prostitutes. They just work to get a result. So yeah, that's my philosophy. I mean, I don't do too well on a paleo diet. If anything, I'm probably on what they call the Viking diet, which is exactly how I eat day to day, really. But if your body likes carbohydrates, then the Pritikin diet isn't going to work. If you're from a polar region of the world, so outside the equatorial zone, eating a lot of protein might really work for you. But again, it comes to the source of where you get the food. So if I ate commercial grade beef a lot, I'd be sick. But because I go out of my way to find the organic, the best quality I can find, I haven't been to the doctor since I was 15, I think. I'm almost 37, so haven't missed a day of work in 20 years. I don't take fancy supplements or vitamins. I get athletes coming in and training with me, and they always ask me, "Oh, what supplements do you take? What drugs are you on?" I'll say, "Well, you know what drugs I'm on? Chicken, broccoli, carrots, and the most important, a reason to be alive."
That's huge. That's huge. If you have purpose and you're moving towards something in life, it's going to create a completely different chemical environment within.
Yeah, I mean, it takes energy to change, and that energy comes from your food. Simple as that.
And what I typically tell my clients as well in terms of food, obviously there can be an emotional attachment to food. We know that when you eat food, it changes your physiology, and that can change your emotional state. You have blood flow to your digestive system. That's going to make you change how you feel. So what I tell clients to do is to identify, well, how can we meet your needs? Like, what needs are you meeting through food? That can be another thing as you're phasing out. I'm not sure if you experience this as well, Matt, but it's like, what needs are the food meeting for you, and how can we meet those needs in a healthy way? As you're saying, purpose to live, like that's meeting needs. You're going to engage in the habits and the activities to make that the case.
That, my friend, is a whole different discussion. Yes, I've torn my teeth out, torn my hair out trying to get clients off coffee, off alcohol. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it necessarily per se, but the way they were having it, the timing they were having it was probably the most important thing. I was banging my head against the wall, but then I finally realized, as you said, there's an emotional attachment to it, because in my experience, it's more females than males have an emotional attachment to coffee, because they go for the coffee after the gym, which is the worst time to have coffee, FYI. They go for a coffee with their girlfriend, so they catch up with the gossip or whatever they talk about. And that's their emotional bucket being filled, but they're associating that with the coffee. Most of the time, it's got nothing to do with the coffee, but it's got an emotional attachment to it. So it's a lot harder to break down. Now, I don't try and do that anymore. I'm more of if you're going to have coffee, have it before your workout. If you're going to go to the cafe after the gym session, get some food, get some anything but coffee. Well, I can explain why, but I don't know if we're going off subject now. But it comes to a stress thing as well, because every time you're stressed, it takes the blood from the gut and distributes it to the muscles and the joints, so you can run, because your body doesn't know, at the cellular level, the body doesn't know the difference between running from a lion or eating a Big Mac. Stress is stress, period. So blood goes to the periphery. When the blood goes to periphery, your digestion stops. And after you've eaten, after you've drinking anything, after you've eaten, your body needs to digest it. If your body doesn't digest it, it can't get the energy to the cells. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and this is, once again, this is like we could do a whole other topic on this one as well.
Yeah, I'm trying not to, actually.
Yeah. So I think for today, in terms of value, lots of people at home, I love how I'm just dodging the sun here. I'm just doing a sun dodge. Lots of people have obviously accumulated a lot of value from some of the many of the gifts that you've shared today. And like I said last time, yeah, that's right. Drinking water at home, everyone, as well. The bigger the bottle, the more you have to drink. It just becomes a habit. But for anyone who's watching at home, if you have any questions for Matt, like I did last time, I'm going to post his Facebook, his Instagram. Feel free to reach out. If there's any more questions you want us to answer, we would love to. And if you have any questions for myself that you want me to pass on to Matt, you can contact me as well. So yeah, as I originally said in the first video, I'm doing this because I know how much value that Matt can give to you guys watching at home. So much of this knowledge is not common, and trying to uncover the things for you so that you can live your happiest, healthiest life possible. Because ultimately, as a human being, that's what you deserve. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on again today, Matt, and thank you for your time. It's an absolute pleasure as always. I learned so much. So really, thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you, Peter, for the opportunity to share. And that's what we're all here for, to share. And if we can help one person, then that's, well, for me, that's job done. So as long as we get the right information out there to help people do what they want to do and not what someone else wants them to do, that's what it's all about. And sorry for the tangents. You could probably do a 5 or 6 part series on nutrition, but yeah, absolute pleasure. And I hope you enjoy your birthday.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I received that. So thank you, Matt. If you have any questions at home, anyone, feel free to contact myself or Matt. And we look forward to speaking to you next time.
See you later.